John, last time I was able to focus with you in terms of my first chapter in being a young man. I went into the University of Utah as an older boy. I went through the University of Utah and in the process became a young man and was ready now to leave home and to, in effect, deal with the world at large. That's, in effect, what the military was. It was my first chapter of being a young man, and I dealt with it in a way that was filled with development. I took advantage of it, and that's what we discussed last time. I found how big the world is, how interesting the world is, how wonderful the world is, how challenging the world is. And I came back having gone in at 21 years old and completing it at 23 years old. And there was an element that came into focus that had never been into focus, and that was the spiritual. I'd attended church. I'd remained active in the church, primarily because that's what my neighborhood did. That's what my activities revolved around, going to church. But in participating in a small branch of individuals who went to church because it was important, it was their life, I knew that there was a part of me that needed a great deal of effort, lots of growth. But I turned 24 years old shortly after coming back. Seemed to me that a mission was not the best use of time at that age. I had not really dedicated myself academically, as I was then very enthused to do. I felt I had possibilities and potential, and I returned a house divided. Divided in the sense that I was mature, having experienced the world, having gained an appreciation for country, for privilege, for opportunity, ready to pursue academics with maturity, recognizing that there was a responsibility to the church that I belonged to, the beliefs that I espoused, the membership that I held in the church. I went through that year from 24 to 25, a house divided. I studied. I took courses that were dedicated only to develop my brain. I never paid any attention to math. I took math classes. I never paid any attention to science. I took chemistry classes. I never paid any attention to biology. I took zoology. I took literature. I took full courses of nothing but courses that were dedicated to anything other than developing my brain. I had confidence that I could be a student, not a scholar, not a high IQ'd academic, but confidence and enthusiasm. In the meantime, I had a responsibility. And I had a bishop that had known me since a little boy. He said, "You know what you should do, Alan? There's only one choice you have. Mac Smith, Bishop Smith. So I'm taking the University of Utah every class, and I'm studying from morning to night. I worked, but I can't even remember where I worked. But in the back of my mind, you know what you should do with the next 2 years of your life, Alan." So in May, or April, May actually, I now turn, I don't know. I'm somewhere the latter part of that year after returning from the Air Force. He says to me, "You go off and take as long as it takes and pray." And I did that in May, turning 25 or 1st of May. I'm sorry, I can't quite remember that. But you go off, Alan. And so I got my sleeping bag, and I went off into Mill Creek Canyon, May. And I took no water, and I took no food. And I parked and walked up the canyon and spent 2 days. And at the end of the 3rd day, about 9 o'clock at night, after being there for 2 days and all the next day, came back, and I climbed in the car, stood on the doorstep of Bishop Smith, and I said, "I'm going to go on a mission." So I told you the Lord would answer your prayers. I said, No, I'm not going because he answered my prayers. I said I didn't hear a peep. I felt distance from, I felt no relationship to God. So I'm going on a mission, not because I was told to go on a mission. It's because I am so far removed from anything of a spiritual nature that I can go up Mill Creek Canyon for 2.5 days and have absolutely no relationship with anything of a spiritual nature. And that was my decision. So it's now May. Then we had to be interviewed by a general authority he immediately made arrangements for me to meet with Elder Alma Sony. And Elder Sony asked me why I was deciding to go on a mission this late in the year. Somehow it seems to me it was like mission presidents. Maybe missionaries went then at a given time. I don't know why he asked me that, why I was deciding to go on a mission at this late date. And I told him that I'd had a difficult time, and he told me that by virtue of coming in at this time, it meant that I could not be called anywhere other than in a stateside mission. How did I feel about that? I told him I had no premonition as to where I would go, and I felt fine about it. He said, well, we'll see what the Lord has in mind for you, but if you're comfortable with the limitation that I've reviewed, do you have anything you need to ask me? And I said no. And the more I thought about the interview, the more concern I felt. It wasn't that I did care, I just didn't like the Lord not to have the opportunity to call me wherever I was supposed to go. And the more I thought about the interview, the more disturbed I became. In any case, the next morning a call came very early from the church office saying, Brother Brown, you've been called to the British Isles. Because of the time, you'll need to come down here directly. We'll have to literally hand carry your papers for a passport. We're hoping we can book passage, but you'll be leaving in June sometime. So I was called to the British Isles, and that was the year before. That was the year before my mission. So I think the important part, John, I left the university, my first chapter, as a young man. I took or tried to take full advantage of every minute of that period. I spent the next year growing in a very meaningful, measurable way, and that was both intellectually and in my heart, spiritually, and that was the story prior to my going to the British Isles in June. I'm now 25 years old, sailing on Queen Elizabeth to spend 2 years on a Mormon Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint mission.